Hello, welcome to another in the series of Ealing Library's local history YouTube videos. Today we are standing outside Rochester House in Little Ealing Lane. Rochester House is one of the oldest inhabited buildings in the London Borough of Ealing, and it dates back to the beginning of the 18th century, so it's even older than the better known Pitsanger Manor. Rochester House was first lived in by Thomas Pearce. Thomas Pearce was a London brewer. It is usually thought that the house dates to 1712 because Pearce died in 1752, and it has been said he lived here for 40 years. Well, it seems as if he actually started to live here in 1715, which is when Thomas Pearce is first listed in the ratepayers list for Little Ealing. His son was Zachary Pearce, and Zachary Pearce became Bishop of Bangor in 1748 and Bishop of Rochester in Kent in 1756. He was described as being a pious and learned prelate. Zachary Pearce died in this house in 1774. He was in his 80s, as was his father was when he died in the same house in 1752. Now, as we know, the house is called Rochester House, but it wasn't called Rochester House until the 1830s. In the 1820s, when the house was up for sale, it was not named as a named house at all. But clearly, in the 1830s, the owners, who were named the Robinsons, decided to call it after the bishop who lived here in the late 18th century. After the death of the Bishop of Rochester in 1774, the house was lived in by a number of soldiers, including Lieutenant Colonel Drinkwater. But the most famous military man to live here between 1812 and 1822 was General Charles Dumouriez. Dumouriez had served in the French army during the French Revolutionary Wars, but fallen out with the government in Paris, and so came to England. After his death, the house was advertised for sale as a family house in its own grounds. The house is a 3-storey red brick building. In the 1820s, it had 4 acres of ground, and these included a pond and a moat around the house with even a drawbridge. However, it was not purchased for a family, but was purchased by the Robinsons to turn it into a girls' boarding school, which it was for the mid-19th century. In 1872, it was bought by Dr. Northcott, and he turned it into a school for young men who wanted to pass the exams needed to get into the military academies such as Sandhurst and Woolwich, and it remained as a military training school, as said, until about 1900. In 1901, it became owned by the Metropolitan Asylums Board, and so briefly, at the beginning of the last century, it was used as a mental home for children. In 1910, it became a school once again, owned by the St Marylebone Schools. In 1917, in the First World War, it was used as Ealing's communal feeding centre for people to get cheap meals during the First World War, especially factory workers and others. The house remained as a school until 1974. It had been used by Mount Lord's Catholic School for much of that time. In 1974, it was bought by the Institute of Production Engineers for officers for the organisation. It remained as such a use until 1996. In 1996, it was converted into flats, some being bedsits and some being 3-bedroom flats. In 1996, you could rent per week a bedsit flat for £120 or a 3-bedroom flat here for £230. It remains residential, divided into flats, as is the case with many large and historic houses still standing in the London Borough of Ealing. Probably the best place to see this house is from the top of an E3 bus as you're travelling between Gunnersbury and Greenford. Thank you for watching this video. Please remember to like, subscribe and comment.